The planet Vareth 7 had 2 suns and endless red deserts. It was not a pretty world, but it was rich in minerals and water lay deep beneath the surface. That was why 2 species had come here to build a colony together. The Varan were tall and thin with blue skin and large dark eyes. They had traveled to stars for thousands of years. The humans had only left their home planet 200 years ago. To the Varan, humans were like children playing in a universe they did not understand. David Cole stood in the hot sun and wiped sweat from his face. He was 34 years old with short brown hair and strong hands that knew how to build things. Behind him, human workers mixed sand with special chemicals to make concrete. They were building something that looked ugly and squat, half buried in the red ground. "More water in this batch," David called out to his team. "The mixture needs to be stronger." A shadow fell over him. He looked up and saw Elder Tomos standing there. The Varan leader was very tall, almost 3 meters, and he wore robes made of shimmering fabric that seemed to glow. Behind him stood Commander Brath, the military leader of the Varan colony. Brath had a scar across his blue face, and he always looked at humans like they were insects. "What is this thing you are building?" Elder Tomos asked. His voice was smooth and musical, the way all Varan voices sounded. David stood up straight. "It is a shelter, Elder, a storm bunker." Tomos looked at the ugly structure. It had thick walls and small windows. Pipes stuck out at strange angles. It looked like a gray box that someone had dropped and forgotten about. "A shelter from what?" Tomos asked. "From bad weather, sandstorms, anything dangerous that might come." Commander Brath made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You are building a hole in the ground to hide from weather?" "It is not just a hole," David said calmly. "The walls are 2 meters thick. We have air filters, water recyclers, and food storage for 3 months. It can hold 200 people." Tomos raised one thin eyebrow. "Impressive for a primitive species, I suppose. But tell me, human, have you seen our shields?" David had seen them. Everyone had seen them. The Varan settlement was beautiful. Their buildings were made of crystal that caught the sunlight and sparkled like jewels. Around the whole settlement, a shimmering energy shield glowed softly blue. It was technology far beyond anything humans could make. "Your shields are very impressive," David admitted. "They have protected us on 100 worlds," Tomos said. "They can stop asteroids. They can stop plasma weapons. They can stop anything." He looked at the human shelter again and shook his head slowly. "Your people waste time and resources building this ugly thing when you could simply shelter with us during any emergency." "Thank you for the offer," David said. "But humans like to be prepared. It is our way." Brath stepped forward. His dark eyes were cold. "Your way is the way of frightened animals that dig holes in the dirt. The Varan do not hide. We stand tall and let our technology protect us." David did not argue. He had learned that arguing with Varan was pointless. They had been traveling the stars when humans were still living in caves. They believed they knew everything. After the Varan leaders left, Emily Ward walked over to David. She was 29, with red hair tied back in a ponytail and sharp green eyes. She was the colony's geologist, and she spent most of her time studying the planet's rocks and weather. "They laughed at us again?" she asked. "They always laugh at us," David said. "It does not matter. We keep building." Emily looked worried. She held a tablet computer in her hands and kept checking the screen. "David, I need to show you something." She held up the tablet. On the screen were colored patterns that showed wind and pressure across the planet. David was not an expert, but even he could see that something strange was happening in the northern part of the world. "What am I looking at?" he asked. "Trouble," Emily said. "I have been watching this for 2 weeks. There is a massive pressure system building up there. The temperature differences between the day side and night side of the planet are creating something big. How big? Emily's face was serious. I'm not sure yet, but I think it could be a planet-wide sandstorm. Something much worse than anything we have seen in our 6 months here. David looked at the peaceful red sky above them. It was hard to believe anything bad could come from such a calm day. Have you told Marcus? Marcus Bell was the human colony coordinator. He was 45 years old, wise and careful, and everyone respected him. I am going to tell him now, Emily said. But you know what will happen. He will try to warn the Voron, and they will not listen. She was right. That evening, Marcus Bell stood before Elder Tomos in the Voron Council chamber. The room was beautiful, with walls of pale blue crystal and soft lights that floated in the air. Marcus explained what Emily had found. He showed them the data. He asked them to prepare for a possible emergency. Tomos listened politely and then smiled. Your concern is touching, Coordinator Bell, but we have monitored this planet for 6 months. The weather has been calm. Your scientist is young and inexperienced. She sees danger where there is none. With respect, Elder, Emily is very good at her job. If she says something is coming, I believe her. Commander Brath stood up from his chair. Enough. The humans may hide in their dirt hole if they wish. The Voron will not panic because of a weather report. He walked out of the room without looking back. Tomos sighed softly. I am sorry, Coordinator. Your people mean well. But you must understand, we have seen so much more than you. We know what real danger looks like. This is not it. Marcus returned to the human settlement feeling frustrated and worried. He found David and Emily waiting for him. They did not listen, he said. It was not a question. No, Marcus admitted. They think we are scared children. Emily was checking her tablet again. Her face had gone pale. The system is growing faster than I expected. I think we have maybe 1 week, possibly less. Then we work faster, David said. We finish the shelter. We stock it with everything we need. And we hope I am wrong about how bad this is going to be. But deep inside, David knew he was not wrong. He had grown up on a colony world that had terrible winters. He had seen what nature could do when people were not prepared. The Voron had their shields and their beautiful buildings and their thousands of years of history. But they had never lived on a world like Earth. They had never learned the hard lessons that humans had learned. Sometimes the universe did not care how advanced you were. Sometimes it just wanted to show you who's really in charge. As the sun set over Varus 7 and the sky turned deep purple, a young Voron scientist named Rena stood at the edge of the human construction site. She watched David and his team work late into the night, reinforcing walls and checking systems. Unlike the other Voron, she did not laugh. Instead, she felt something she could not explain. Something like worry. Something like respect. She would remember this feeling later when the sky turned red and the wind began to scream. 1 week passed faster than anyone expected. The human shelter was finished, ugly and solid and ready for whatever might come. The Voron continued their work as if nothing was wrong. Their crystal buildings sparkled in the sunlight. Their energy shields hummed softly, surrounding everything they had built. Emily Ward had not slept well in days. She spent every hour watching her instruments and checking her data. The pressure system in the north was no longer just a colored pattern on a screen. It had become something real and terrible. Through long-range cameras, she could see it forming on the horizon. It looked like a wall of rust-colored clouds that stretched from the ground to the sky. She ran to find Marcus Bell. He was in the main human building, talking with the other colony leaders about food supplies. It is coming, she said, breathing hard. We have maybe 12 hours, maybe less. Marcus stood up immediately. How bad? Worse than I thought. The winds could reach 400 kilometers per hour, maybe more. And the sand is not normal sand, Marcus. It has tiny crystal pieces in it, sharp like glass. The static electricity alone could fry unprotected equipment. Marcus looked at the other humans in the room. They were all quiet, all serious. These were people who understood danger. They had grown up on hard worlds, faced hard times, and survived by being smart and careful. "Begin evacuation to the shelter," Marcus ordered. "Everyone, no exceptions. Take only what you need." The humans moved quickly and calmly. They had practiced this many times. Families gathered their children. Workers grabbed emergency bags that were always packed and ready. Within 2 hours, every human in the colony was either in the shelter or on their way there. Marcus knew he had to try one more time. He walked across the open ground between the human and Voran settlements. The wind was already picking up, blowing dust into his eyes. When he reached the Voran Council building, he found Elder Tomos and Commander Brath looking at their own instruments. "You see it now," Marcus said. It was not a question. Tomos turned to look at him. For the first time, the old Voran did not look so confident. "Our sensors show a minor atmospheric disturbance. Nothing our shields cannot handle." "Your sensors are wrong. Our geologist has been studying this planet for 6 months. She knows what she is looking at. This is not a minor disturbance. This is a planet-killer storm." Commander Brath stepped forward angrily. "You dare tell us our technology is wrong? We have been charting stars while your ancestors were hitting rocks together." "I am not trying to insult you," Marcus said calmly. "I am trying to save lives. Please, bring your people to our shelter. We have room. We have supplies. We can all survive this together." Brath laughed coldly. "Survive? In your dirt hole? We would rather face any storm than crawl into the ground like worms." Elder Tomos raised a hand to silence his commander. "Coordinator Bell, I appreciate your concern, truly, but you do not understand our shields. They have protected us from asteroids that could destroy cities. They have stopped plasma weapons that could melt mountains. A windstorm, no matter how strong, is nothing to us." Marcus looked at both of them for a long moment. He wanted to argue more. He wanted to grab them and shake them until they understood. But he could see it was useless. Their pride was too strong. Their faith in their technology was too deep. "The door to our shelter will stay open until the storm hits," Marcus said quietly. "Anyone who wants to come is welcome. After that, we seal it for safety. I pray you will not need us, Elder, but if you do, we will be there." He turned and walked away without looking back. Inside the human shelter, the atmosphere was busy but calm. Families settled into assigned areas. Engineers checked and double-checked every system. Lily, the medical officer, organized her supplies and prepared for any injuries that might come. David stood at the main control panel, watching screens that showed the outside world. The sky was changing color now. What had been blue was now orange. What had been orange was now red. And on the horizon, that wall of rust-colored cloud was growing bigger every minute. Emily stood beside him. "It is beautiful in a terrible way," she said. "Most dangerous things are," David replied. The door to the shelter opened and a tall blue figure stepped inside. It was Rena, the young Voran scientist who had watched them build. She looked nervous and uncertain, like she was not sure if she was doing the right thing. David walked over to her. "Welcome," he said simply. "We have space for you." "I should be with my people," Rena said. Her voice shook slightly, but I could not stop thinking about what your scientist said. About the crystal particles in the sand. Our shields are made to stop big things. Solid objects, weapons, not tiny pieces of glass moving at 400 kilometers per hour. "You were smart to think about that," David said. Come, let me show you where you can stay." As he led her deeper into the shelter, Rena looked around at everything. The walls were plain and gray. The lights were simple white tubes. There was no beauty here, no elegance, nothing that sparkled or glowed. But the walls were solid. The air was clean, and everyone inside seemed calm and prepared. "Why did you build this?" she asked suddenly. "Your people could have built something beautiful. You could have asked us for shield technology. Why build this ugly thing?" David thought about the question for a moment. Humans have a saying. We say that beauty will not save you when the storm comes. We build ugly things because ugly things survive. Pretty things break. Rena did not answer, but something in her eyes changed. She was beginning to understand. Outside, the wind grew stronger. The sky turned from red to almost black. Through the cameras, they could see the Varan shields glowing brighter as they fought against the growing force of the wind. They could see the crystal buildings inside, still standing, still beautiful. And then the first wave of the storm hit. It came like a living thing, like some ancient monster made of sand and wind and fury. The noise was incredible. Even deep inside the shelter, the humans could hear it screaming above them. The walls shook. Dust leaked through tiny cracks that no one had noticed before. Children cried and parents held them close. David watched the screens with eyes that did not blink. He saw the Varan shields flicker for just a moment. Just a tiny moment. But he saw it. "Emily," he said quietly, "tell me what you see." Emily studied her instruments. Her face was very pale. "The shields are holding, but barely. The particles are too small. Some of them are getting through. And the static charge is building up. If that continues for hours, their power systems could overload." Marcus joined them at the control panel. "How long can they last?" "I do not know," Emily admitted. "Maybe a day. Maybe less. It depends on how long the storm lasts and how much power they have." They stood in silence, watching the screens, listening to the wind scream and waiting. Outside, the Varan shields flickered again. And again. Each time a little longer. Each time a little weaker. Inside the Varan settlement, things were not so calm. Alarms were sounding in buildings that had never heard alarms before. Engineers ran from one system to another, trying to understand why their perfect shields were failing. Commander Brath shouted orders that no one could follow. And Elder Tomos stood at a window, watching tiny cracks appear in glass. That was supposed to be unbreakable. He thought about the human coordinator and his warning. He thought about the ugly gray shelter half buried in the ground. He thought about all the times he had laughed at human technology. Human fear, human caution. Now, as his beautiful world crumbled around him, Elder Thomas began to wonder if the humans had been right all along. The storm was only beginning. 6 hours into the storm, the Varan finally understood how wrong they had been. Elder Tomo stood in the main control room of the Varan settlement. Around him, screens showed nothing but red and black chaos. The wind outside had become something beyond measurement. Their instruments could not even read it anymore. They just showed error messages and flashing warnings. The shields were failing. Not all at once, but slowly, piece by piece. The tiny crystal particles in the sand were doing exactly what Rena had feared. They were too small to trigger the shield's main defenses. They slipped through the energy field like water through a net. Each particle was nothing by itself. But there were billions of them, trillions, and they kept coming. Hour after hour, grinding against everything they touched. The static electricity was even worse. The Varan shields ran on delicate power systems that did not like electrical interference. The constant charge from the storm was making the generators hot. Too hot. Engineers had already shut down 3 backup systems to prevent explosions. How much power do we have left? Tomos asked. His voice was calm, but his eyes showed fear. A young engineer checked his screen. At current rate, maybe 4 more hours. If we reduce shield strength, maybe 8. If we reduce shield strength, those particles will tear through our buildings in minutes, Commander Brath said. He was standing near the wall, his injured arm hanging at his side. A piece of falling crystal had cut him an hour ago. Blue blood stained his uniform. Then what do you suggest, Commander? Tomos asked quietly. Brath had no answer. For the first time in his life, the great warrior had no answer in the human shelter. Things were difficult but stable. The walls shook constantly. The noise was terrible. But the structure held. It was designed to flex, not break. The concrete absorbed the pounding. The filters kept the air clean. The recyclers turned wastewater into drinking water. David walked through the shelter, checking on everyone. Families sat together in small groups. Some were playing games to pass the time. Others were sleeping despite the noise. A few were praying. Everyone was scared, but no one was panicking. Humans had survived worse things than storms. They knew how to wait. They knew how to endure. He found Rena sitting alone in a corner, staring at a wall. Her blue skin had turned a pale color that David had never seen before. He sat down beside her without speaking. I can feel them dying, Rena whispered. My people. I can feel their fear. David did not know what to say. He could not imagine what it must be like to feel your people suffering when you were safe. It seemed like a terrible gift. They might still be okay, he said, knowing it was probably a lie. No, Rena shook her head slowly. I felt the shields fail at the eastern edge 20 minutes ago. I felt the wind tear through the science building. 3 people died there. I knew their names. David's stomach turned cold. I am sorry. Why do you help us? Rena asked suddenly. She turned to look at him with eyes full of pain and confusion. We laughed at you. We called you primitive. We said your shelter was a hole for frightened animals. Why do you care if we live or die? David thought about the question. It was a good question. Maybe the best question anyone had ever asked him. Because that is what humans do, he finally said. We help, even when people do not deserve it. Even when they will not say thank you. We help because if we do not, what is the point of being alive? Rena stared at him for a long moment. Then she began to cry. Blue tears ran down her face, and she did not wipe them away. A loud alarm made David jump to his feet. He ran to the control room, where Marcus and Emily were already gathered around the communication system. Through the static and noise, a voice was coming through. It was faint and broken, but they could understand enough. Human colonists. This is Elder Tomos of the Vorin. We request. Shields are failing. Many injured. Please. Any assistance. The transmission cut off in a burst of static. Marcus looked at the others in the room. His face was hard and serious. We have to help them. How? Emily asked. The storm is still at full strength out there. If we open the main door, the wind will destroy everything inside. We do not use the main door, David said. Everyone turned to look at him. He walked to the control panel and pulled up a map of the shelter. When I designed this place, I added something extra. Something I did not tell anyone about. He pressed a button and part of the map lit up. It showed a network of tunnels running underground from the shelter toward the Vorin settlement. Tunnels? Marcus asked, surprised. When did you build tunnels? At night. With a small team. I paid them from my own salary. David looked slightly embarrassed. I knew the Vorin might need help someday. I knew they would be too proud to ask until it was too late. So I built a way to reach them without going outside. Emily shook her head in amazement. You crazy, wonderful man. The tunnels come out near the Vorin storage buildings, David continued. From there, We can move through their underground maintenance corridors to reach the main settlement. It will be dangerous, but it can be done. I will go, Marcus said immediately. No, David said. You need to stay here and coordinate. I will go. I know the tunnels best. I am going too, Emily said before anyone could argue. They will need a scientist who understands what is happening with the storm. Rena stepped forward. I must come. I can help my people trust you. I can translate if needed. And I know the Vorin buildings better than any human. David wanted to argue, but he could see there was no point. Rena had made up her mind. Fine. We need 3 more volunteers. Anyone good with medical emergencies and not afraid of tight spaces. Lily raised her hand. I am a medical officer. I should come. 2 other humans volunteered as well. A man named Tom, who had worked in emergency rescue before, and a woman named Grace, who had engineering training. Within 20 minutes, the team was ready. They stood at the entrance to the tunnel system. It was dark and narrow and smelled like dust and chemicals. Behind them, the shelter hummed with life. Ahead of them, only darkness and the faint vibration of the storm raging above. Marcus clasped David's hand firmly. Bring them back. All of them. Anyone who wants to come, bring them here. I will, David promised. He turned on his flashlight and stepped into the tunnel. Emily followed, then Rena, then the others. The entrance closed behind them with a soft hiss. They walked in silence for a long time. The tunnel was stable, but the storm made everything shake. Dust fell from the ceiling. Strange sounds echoed from somewhere ahead. David kept his eyes forward and his mind focused. He had built these tunnels. He knew every meter. He would not fail now. After what felt like hours, they reached the end. A heavy metal door stood between them and the Vorin underground corridors. This is it, David said. Once we open this door, there's no turning back until the job is done. He looked at each person in his team. They were tired and scared, but they were also determined. They nodded at him one by one. David took a deep breath, turned the handle, and pushed the door open. The sound of screaming wind and breaking crystal flooded in from somewhere above. The Vorin settlement was dying, and 6 humans and 1 brave Vorin were the only hope it had left. The Vorin underground corridors were nothing like David had expected. Even beneath the surface, they were beautiful. Soft blue lights glowed from the walls. The floors were smooth crystal. Patterns decorated every surface like frozen music, but beauty could not hide the destruction. Cracks ran through the walls like spider webs. Some lights flickered. Others had gone dark completely. The sound of the storm above was muffled but constant, a deep roar that never stopped. Rena took the lead. She knew these corridors from her work as a scientist. She moved quickly, stepping over fallen debris and ducking under broken beams. The humans followed close behind, their flashlights cutting through the growing darkness. The main shelter is this way, Rena said. Most of our people should be there. They climbed a stairway that shook with every step. At the top, they found a heavy door. Rena pressed her hand against a panel, and it slid open with a grinding sound. The scene inside was chaos. Hundreds of Vorin filled a large hall that was never meant to hold so many. Some were injured, blue blood staining their clothes. Others sat in corners, staring at nothing, too shocked to move. Children cried in their parents' arms. The air smelled like smoke and fear, and something sharp that burned the lungs. Elder Tomos saw them first. His eyes went wide with surprise, and something that might have been hope. He pushed through the crowd toward them. You came, he said. His voice was rough and tired. After everything we said, everything we did, you came. We told you the door would stay open, David said simply. We meant it. Tomos looked at the small group of humans. 6 people. 6 ordinary people who had walked through underground tunnels into a dying settlement to save strangers who had mocked them. He did not have words for what he felt. "What do we do?" he asked. It was the first time in his long life that Tomos had asked a human for guidance. David looked around the room, thinking fast. "We cannot take everyone at once. The tunnels are narrow. We will move in groups of 30 or 40. Women and children first, then injured, then everyone else. My team will guide each group back to the human shelter." "That will take hours," Tomos said. "Then we better start now." Lily moved through the crowd, checking the injured. She worked with calm efficiency, wrapping wounds and giving medicine. Tom and Grace helped her, carrying those who could not walk. Emily stayed near the entrance, watching for any sign that the corridors might collapse. The first group was ready within 20 minutes. 30 Voran, mostly mothers with small children, gathered near the tunnel entrance. They looked scared and uncertain. Many had never been underground before. The tunnels seemed dark and frightening to them. Rena spoke to them in their own language. Her voice was gentle but firm. She told them to stay together, to follow the humans, to be brave. She told them the humans had built a shelter that would protect them. She told them everything would be okay. David led the first group into the tunnels. He moved slowly, checking behind him often, making sure no one fell behind. The children were crying. The mothers were scared, but they kept moving, step by step, meter by meter. When they reached the human shelter, the Voran stopped and stared. The ugly gray walls, the simple lights, the plain floors. It looked nothing like their beautiful settlement, but it was warm. The air was clean, and people inside were smiling, offering blankets and water and food. "Welcome," Marcus Bell said to each person as they entered. "You are safe now." David did not rest. He turned and went back through the tunnels for another group. The hours that followed blurred together. David made trip after trip. Emily guided groups when he needed rest. Tom carried injured Voran on his back through the narrow passages. Grace fixed broken lights in the corridors so people could see. Lily treated wounds that seemed impossible to survive. And somehow the patients kept living. Commander Brath refused to leave until the very end. Even with his injured arm, he helped organize his people. He counted heads. He made sure families stayed together. He even carried a child whose mother was too weak to walk. When David came to get the last group, Brath was standing guard at the tunnel entrance. His proud face was dirty and tired and older than it had looked before. "You saved us," Brath said quietly. "You would have done the same for us," David replied. Brath looked at him for a long moment. Then he shook his head slowly. "No, I would not have. That is what shames me most." David did not know what to say. He just gestured toward the tunnel. "Come on. Your people are waiting." The last group moved through the corridors. Behind them, the beautiful Voran settlement groaned and cracked. Crystal walls that had taken years to build began to shatter. The shields, finally depleted of all power, flickered and died. The storm rushed in like a hungry animal, destroying everything in its path. Elder Tomos was the last to step into the tunnel. He paused and looked back at everything his people had built. The science halls where they had made great discoveries. The homes where families had lived and laughed and loved. The council chamber where he had dismissed human warnings with pride and certainty. All of it was gone now, scattered into the wind, ground to dust by the very storm he had refused to believe in. A hand touched his arm. It was David, standing beside him in the darkness. "I know it hurts," David said softly, "but buildings can be rebuilt. People cannot be replaced. You made the right choice in the end. That is what matters." Tomos nodded slowly. He turned away from the destruction and walked into the tunnel. Behind him, the entrance collapsed. sealing off the past forever. When they reached the human shelter, the scene was overwhelming. Over 600 beings now crowded into a space meant for 200. Voron and humans sat together on the floor. They shared food and water. They helped each other with injuries. Children from both species played together in corners, too young to understand why their world had changed. The shelter groaned under the weight of so many people. The air systems worked at maximum. The water recyclers struggled to keep up. But everything held. The ugly gray walls did their job. The simple systems kept working. Marcus Bell found David sitting alone near the main entrance. He looked exhausted. His clothes were torn and dirty. His hands were bleeding from rough tunnel walls. "You did something incredible today," Marcus said. David shook his head. "I just did what needed to be done. Those tunnels. You built them knowing this day might come. You spent your own money, your own time, for people who laughed at you." David was quiet for a moment. Then he said something Marcus would never forget. "My grandfather used to tell me something. He said a good man builds bridges, even when others build walls. He said you never know when someone will need to cross over." I guess I just believe that. Outside, the storm continued to rage. The wind screamed. The sand ground against the walls like a living thing trying to get in. But inside the shelter, two species that had been strangers were becoming something more. They were becoming neighbors, friends, family. The worst was not over yet. They had 72 hours of storm still ahead of them. But they would face it together, and that made all the difference. 72 hours. That was how long the storm lasted. 3 days of howling wind and grinding sand and darkness. 3 days of 600 people crammed into a space meant for 200. 3 days of shared fear, shared hope, and shared survival. On the first day, there was tension. The Voron were not used to tight spaces. They were not used to plain food and recycled water. Some complained. Some argued. A few demanded special treatment because of their status back in their settlement. Those complaints stopped quickly. The humans did not argue or fight back. They simply continued to share everything equally. When a Voron elder complained about his sleeping space, a human family offered their own spot and moved to an even smaller corner. When a Voron officer demanded better food, a human child gave him half of her own meal with a smile. Shame is a powerful teacher. The Voron learned their lesson fast. On the second day, something changed. The walls between the species began to fall. Voron engineers noticed cracks forming in one section of the shelter wall. Instead of waiting for humans to fix it, they asked how they could help. David showed them how to mix quick-setting concrete. They worked side by side for hours, reinforcing the weak spot until it was stronger than before. Commander Brath, his arms still in a sling, took guard shifts alongside human security officers. He did not ask for special treatment. He did not give orders. He simply stood watch like everyone else, protecting sleeping families from any danger that might come. Elder Tomo spent long hours talking with Marcus Bell. They talked about their peoples, their histories, their hopes and fears. Marcus told him about Earth, the human homeworld. He described ice ages that lasted thousands of years, plagues that killed millions, wars that nearly destroyed entire civilizations. How did your people survive all that? Tomos asked in wonder. By adapting, Marcus said. By helping each other. By never giving up, even when everything seemed hopeless. Humans are not the strongest species. We are not the smartest. But we are stubborn. We refuse to die. You build ugly shelters, Tomo said slowly, beginning to understand. Because beauty does not matter when survival is at stake. Exactly. We can make things beautiful later. First, we must make sure there is a later. On the third day, the impossible happened. The storm began to weaken. The screaming wind dropped to a whisper. The red darkness outside turned to gray, then to pale orange. Through the cameras, they could see the sky clearing for the first time in 3 days. When David finally opened the main door, sunlight flooded in. People blinked and covered their eyes. Many began to cry. Others laughed. Some simply walked outside and stood in the warm light, breathing fresh air for the first time in what felt like forever. The planet they saw was not the one they remembered. The Voron settlement was gone. Not damaged. Not broken. Gone. The crystal buildings had been ground to powder. The energy shield generators were scattered across the desert like broken toys. All that remained were foundations and dust. Rena walked to where her laboratory had once stood. She knelt down and picked up a handful of colored dust that used to be her research equipment. Tears ran down her blue face, but she did not make a sound. David found her there. He did not say anything. He just stood beside her in silence, letting her grieve. "We lost everything," Rena finally whispered. "Hundreds of years of work. Thousands of artifacts and documents. All gone. Not everything," David said gently. "Your people survived. Your knowledge is still in your minds. Your culture is still in your hearts. Buildings are just things. They can be replaced." Rena looked at him with eyes full of pain and wonder. "How can you be so calm? How can humans always find hope when everything seems hopeless?" David thought about the question. It was the same question Rena had asked before, in a different way. Maybe it was the only question that really mattered. "Because hope is not something you find," he finally answered. "Hope is something you choose. Every day, no matter what happens, you choose to believe tomorrow can be better. That is what makes us human." The colony began to rebuild. Not 2 separate settlements this time, but one. Voron and humans worked together from the first day. They argued about designs. They disagreed about methods. But they always found ways to compromise. The new buildings were strange and beautiful. They combined Voron elegance with human strength. Crystal walls supported by concrete frames. Energy systems backed up by mechanical generators. Beautiful designs that could survive anything the universe threw at them. Commander Brath took charge of security for both peoples. He trained mixed teams of Voron and human officers. He never again spoke of humans as primitive or weak. When new colonists arrived and asked about the storm, Brath told them the truth. He told them how humans had saved his people when their own technology failed. He told them about David's tunnels, built in secret, just in case they were ever needed. Elder Thomas retired from leadership. He said he was too old, too set in his ways, to lead a new kind of colony. But everyone knew the real reason. He carried shame for his arrogance, for his blindness, for nearly letting his people die because of pride. He spent his remaining years teaching young Voron about humans. He taught them to respect those who build for survival instead of glory. Rena became the new lead scientist. She worked closely with Emily, combining Voron knowledge with human practical thinking. Together, they developed new ways to predict storms on Vareth 7. They created warning systems that would give colonists days of notice instead of hours. No one would ever be caught unprepared again. At the center of the new colony, the original human shelter still stood. It was scarred and sandblasted, ugly as ever, but no one suggested tearing it down. Instead, the Voron added something to its walls. An inscription in their ancient language, carved deep into the concrete where it would last forever. The day it was finished, a ceremony was held. Every person in the colony gathered around the old shelter. Elder Tomos stepped forward to read the words for the first time in public. "Here stood human wisdom when our pride had blinded us," he read in a voice thick with emotion. "Here they welcomed us when we had given them only scorn. Here we learn that true strength is not in shields or weapons, but in hearts brave enough to save even those who do not deserve saving. No one spoke. Many cried. Even Commander Brath wiped his eyes, though he would deny it later. David stood at the edge of the crowd, uncomfortable with all the attention. He never wanted to be a hero. He just wanted to build things that worked and help people who needed help. The ceremony felt too big for him, too important. He tried to slip away quietly. Rena caught up with him before he could escape. She walked beside him as he climbed a small hill overlooking the colony. From there, they could see everything. The new buildings rising from the dust. The construction crews of both species working side by side. The future being built one stone at a time. You never answered my question, Rena said softly. Back in the tunnels, I asked why you built a way to reach us. You said humans just help. But that is not really an answer. David watched the sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The first beautiful sunset in 3 days. Maybe the most beautiful sunset he had ever seen. When I was young, he finally said, my father told me something I never forgot. He said every person you meet is fighting a battle you cannot see. Everyone is scared of something. Everyone needs help sometimes. The only thing that separates good people from bad people is whether they choose to help anyway. He turned to look at Rena. Her blue skin glowed softly in the fading light. She looked different somehow, stronger, wiser, changed by everything that had happened. I built those tunnels because someday someone might need them. That is the only reason. That is always the only reason. You build bridges before you need them. You dig tunnels before the storm. You help people before they ask. Because when the wind is screaming and the world is falling apart, it is too late to start being kind. Rena nodded slowly. She understood now. Not just the words, but the truth behind them. The reason humans had survived their harsh world and spread across the stars. The reason they built ugly shelters and dug secret tunnels and never stopped hoping, even when hope seemed foolish. They were not the strongest. They were not the smartest. But they were kind. Stubbornly, impossibly, beautifully kind. And in the end, that made all the difference. Below them, the colony lights began to flicker on. Voices called out as workers finished their day. Children laughed somewhere in the growing darkness. Two species that had been strangers were now family, bound together by 3 days of terror and a simple gray building that refused to fall. David smiled and started, walking back toward home. Rena walked beside him. Behind them, the stars came out one by one, endless and full of possibilities. The storm was over. The future was beginning. And humans, as always, would be there to help build it.